Today we're going to talk about 5.3, which is called properties of addition and multiplication. What this is it's going to tell us some properties or rules that will help us sort of solve these other problems whenever we have a variable in them. So it kind of helps us rearrange our problems so then they're a little bit easier to solve, okay? The first part of this, we're going to go through the rules and then we will kind of do some practice with them, okay? For our think about it problem, says choose 4 values for a variable x, then evaluate each expression for each value of x. Are any of the expressions equivalent? So on here, let's put in, let's see if it'll let my pen work. We're gonna do 1, 2, 3, and 4 for all of these values for x. All right, so in our first one, if I want 1 for x, 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 1 more is 9. Putting in 2, 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 4 more is 10. Putting in 3 would give us 11, and putting in 4 would give us 12. Right, here on our next one, putting in 1 there, 16 times 1 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. 16 times 3 is 48. 16 times 4 is 64. Okay, on our next one here, 1 times 4 would be 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 2 times 4 would be 8. Times 4 would be 32. 3 times 4 is 12. Times 4 is 48. 4 times 4 is 16. Times 4 is 64. Okay, plugging this one in here. 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 4 more is 9. Plugging in 2, we will get 10. Plugging in 3, we would get 11. Plugging in 4, we would get 12. Okay, and then our last one here, if I plug, or these last few, I've got 1 plus 8 is 9, 2 plus 8 is 10, 3 plus 8 is 11, 4 plus 8 is 12. And then here I've got 4 times 1, it's 4, times 4 is 16. Plugging in 2 would give us 32. Plugging in 3 gives us 48. Plugging in 4 will give us 64. Okay. Now on these ones, if they have the same input value and the same output, so we put in 1, 2, 3, 4, so they all have the same input. That output, that's going to tell us if they are equivalent. So these 3 all have the same output values. Okay, and then these 3 all have the same. So those ones are going to be equivalent. All right, so our vocab here, these ones are very important for us today. So again, you'll take a picture or write these down as we go through them. Our commutative property of addition. So commutative is just talking about the order. So if I have A plus B, I know that's the same thing as B plus A. Or 1 plus 2 is the same thing as 2 plus 1. For commutative property of multiplication, the same thing, just with multiplication. So if I have A times B, I know I can switch that order around and have B times A. Or using my numbers, 1 times 2 is the same thing as 2 times 1. So when you have commutative, that is talking about the order. Okay, for our associative, you can see I've got these little parentheses in here. So associative is going to have parentheses. So for associative property of addition, what that's telling us is I have A plus doing B plus C in parentheses. But then I can slide those parentheses over and do A plus B first and then add C. So it would give us the same answer. Okay, if you're not sure, double check here on this next one. I've got 2 plus 3 is 5. Plus 1 more is 6. Over here, 1 plus 2 is 3. Plus 3 is 6. Okay, so associative property, it's like those parentheses are kind of sliding around. And then same thing for associative property of multiplication. So just using our multiplication symbols, I can do my B times C, then times A, or I can slide those parentheses over and do A times B, and then times C. Okay, again, if you're not sure, double check with our numbers. 2 times 3 is 6, times 1 is 6. Over here, 1 times 2 is 2, times 3 would be 6. Okay, so these ones, you have your parentheses, or it's talking about how they are grouped. So what things you're going to evaluate first. What's the group? Okay, so those parentheses can kind of slide around. These next two, these ones are pretty straightforward. Addition property of 0. What that tells us is anything plus 0 is just itself. Okay, so I can always get rid of that and just make it itself. Same thing for our multiplication property of 1. Anything times 1 is itself. So here on this next one, I've got 2 times 1, just going to be 2. So anything times 1 gives us the same number. And then our last one, kind of going along with our think about it problem, equivalent expressions. These are expressions that result in having the same number for any value of each variable. So that's just kind of a fancy way of saying if you input the same thing, you should get the same answer back if they are equivalent. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pause. If you want to take a picture of this, take a picture of it. All right, our next example, so these ones, you're just going to use those properties. So commutative property tells us we can switch the order. So h plus 11 is the same thing as 11 plus h. Commutative property of multiplication, again, just order. 12 times k is the same thing as k times 12. Associative property is when I slide those parentheses over. So instead of doing 9 plus 8 first, I could also do 21 plus 9 and then plus 8. Associative property of multiplication, same thing, slide those parentheses over. I can do 12 times 5, then times 4. Multiplication property of 1, anything times 1 is itself, so 18 times w times 1, I can just rewrite that as 18 times w. And then our last one, addition property of 0, 26 plus c plus 0. Anything plus 0 is just itself. So 26 plus c would be a way that I could simplify that. Okay. Number 7 says describe and correct the error made in identifying the property. Well, if you look here, I've got these parentheses that are just sort of sliding over. So it's not commutative property. It's going to be associative property. Anytime you see those parentheses, you should start to think associative, okay? Now, on our day 2 portion of stuff, you're going to use some of those properties to help you simplify these, meaning you're going to put together the things that can be put together. So if I look at my first one, 7 plus 12 plus x, okay, my parentheses, I can't do 12 plus x, but I can do 7 plus 12. So if I move those parentheses over, then I can combine those things. So that would just be using the associative property of addition. And then if I simplify that, 7 plus 12 is 19. Then my plus x just slides on down. And that's as far as I can simplify it because I can't put a number and a letter together if I don't know what the letter is. Okay, so you're using those properties to try and combine things that can be combined. Same thing here on our next one. I can't do 6.1 plus x, but I can sort of rearrange these things. So I can do 6.1 plus 8.4 and then plus x. So you sort of do associative and commutative. You can switch the order of these two, or you can kind of think about it as switching the parentheses around as well. Okay, so you're going to use commutative and associative on that one. Then adding those together, I get 14.5 and then plus x. Can't simplify those any further. Okay, we would use commutative to switch the order and associative to slide those parentheses around, okay? All right, let's go ahead and pause and try these next two or next three. Okay, here on 1C, so kind of like what we just did, you need to switch the order of those. So I would have 10 plus 9 plus A. Okay, that would be commutative. And then I can switch my parentheses around. So then I've got 10 plus 9 and parentheses plus A, which would be associative. And then I can simplify. So that would give me 19 plus A. Okay, on our next one, I can just slide those parentheses right over. So I've got C plus, in parentheses, 2/3 plus 1/2. Get my common denominator here, that would be 6. So that would be 3, that would be 4. Okay, adding those together, I get C plus 7/6. Or C plus 1 1/6. Okay, and then what we did there, slide those parentheses over, so that would be associative. Last one here, I'm going to slide those parentheses back between the 5 and the 4, so I'll have 5 times 4, then times n. 5 times 4 would be 20, and then that times n, we just have to kind of hang on. So I don't really need that multiplication symbol. So I'll write them right next to each other. Sliding the parentheses over, we know that is associative. Okay, on our next one, using some of those addition property of 0 and multiplication property of 1. So anything times 0 is 0. So here it doesn't even really matter what these other ones are. 9 times 0 is 0. 0 times p is 0. So anytime you have a 0 with multiplication, we've got our 0 property of multiplication. Which, let me see real quick. I don't think we talked about that one at the beginning, but hopefully you knew that anything times 0 is 0. On our next one though, this was the one that we talked about, anything times 1 is just going to be itself. So we can kind of get rid of this times 1 and just have 4.5 times r. So that would be our multiplication property of 1. Okay, we'll go ahead and try these next three. Okay, coming back here, anything times 0 is 0. So I've got 0 as my simplified answer. That would be multiplication property of 0. Anything times 1 is going to just be itself. So I've got m times 24, multiplication property of 0, or multiplication property of 1, sorry. And then our last one, anything plus 0 is just itself. So t plus 15 would be all the way simplified. That would be addition property of 0. Okay, on our next one here, our real life problem, it says you and 6 friends play on a basketball team. A sponsor paid $100 for the league fee, X dollars for each player's t-shirt, and 68.25 for basketballs. Write an expression that represents the total amount in dollars the sponsor paid. Then find the total amount paid when each t-shirt costs $14.50. So here, the league fee, it kind of lays it out for us of how we want to organize our expression. So the league fee is $100 plus the number of t-shirts. So it says you and 6 friends, so that would be 7 total shirts, times, we don't know what our shirt is yet, so we'll just put X. And then plus the cost of our basketballs is $68.25. Okay, so whenever I write this, I can combine my 7 times X as 7X. And then these other two, where I'm adding them together, I can do 168.25 0.25. Okay, so that would be my total expression, combining this part here. Remember that just means multiplication if there's no symbol, and then adding those two things that can be added. Then I want to plug in this 1450, so 7 times 1450 plus 168.25. Do my multiplication first. That gives us 101.50 plus 168.25. And then when we add those, I get 269.75. Okay, again, the word problems, they can be a little bit tricky, but the more you practice kind of writing those out, the easier those will be. All right, last little bit here. We'll go ahead and pause and you can try these couple. Okay, on A, I need to switch the order of these two first. So I'll have C plus 7 and then plus 4. Then I can slide those parentheses over. So C plus 7 plus 4 in parentheses would give us C plus 11. So on this first step, using commutative, switching the order. Second step, moving those parentheses around, would be associative. Same thing here for B. I need to switch the order of those. So I've got 4 and then times 6 times B. That would be commutative, switching the order around inside. Then moving my parentheses around, 4 times 6, then times B. Okay, that would give us 24B. For number 2, it says on a bike trip, you traveled 21 miles on the first day, and miles on the second day, and on the third day, you traveled 5 miles less than on the second day. So a lot of different pieces here for each day. So A says write an expression for the number of miles traveled in 3 days. So the first day, you did 21. Plus the second day, you did just N, so some number. And then we got to add our last one. It says you traveled 5 miles less than, so that's less than, remember, is one of those special ones. So I would have N minus 5. So N minus 5 would be our day 3 minus, hold on a second. So we want minus there. Okay, so that is our expression. You could do some combining of things in there if you felt comfortable combining, or we can just kind of plug it in. It says find the number of miles traveled in 3 days when you traveled 19 on the second day. So 19 is going to be for N. So here I've got 21 plus 19 plus 19 minus 5. And on here, we want to work just left to right. Okay, so that would give me 40 plus 19 minus 5. This would give me 59 minus 5. And then my final answer, total miles, would be 54 miles. Okay, so part of this today is going to be using those properties like we did on A and B to switch those things around so you can combine some things. And then part of it will also be using some of that stuff we talked about last section with writing a few more expressions, okay? Again, the more you practice these, the more you work with those properties, the easier these things will get for you.